Welcome to the Lean and Agile Thinking for NGOs and Nonprofits interview with Dr. Jeffrey Leiker and Dr. Andrew Parris, Chapter 4. In this chapter, we explore how lean practice addresses difficult activity and outcome measurement challenges for NGOs and nonprofits that are of particular interest to philanthropic funding organizations.
Fascinating. Well, we have our share of crises to deal with. A lot of the countries where Medair works, they're long-term crises, so ongoing conflict, ongoing weather patterns that are just unfriendly towards the people who are living there and so forth. One of the things that I in what you're saying, Jeff, was they have these crises, they're stretched to the maximum, and yet they still seem to find time to do things in a structured way. And are they still finding time to measure? Because one of the challenges that I find is people in an NGO context typically feel are overworked. They feel that the burden of the people that they're trying to serve, and it's I don't have time to stop and improve. But okay, I'll improve, but I don't have time to measure my improvement because I just don't have time. I'll do it, but I can't. First of all, we don't have systems for measurement that are so established. We don't have the practices of measurement. How does one do Toyota or the PDCA without measurement? Is it possible, or does one have to put the foot down and say, no, really, you need to measure if you're going to make improvements?
Well, certainly you can improve things without measuring, but if you mentioned Toyota, which is a way it was developed by one of my former students, actually, another former student, Mike Rother, and it was a way to teach the kind of a simplified version of PDCA and what Toyota does to people who don't have any experience with problem-solving scientific thinking, and to get them started. So he calls it starter kata. Kata comes from the martial arts and it's practice routines that you use to learn, say, karate. So the model of kata, the simplified model of kata, is to start with a direction or goal, and then to understand the current condition, and then to start to make changes, but directed toward your goal, as opposed to random kind of responses that are, we so often think of as firefighting. So the advantage of systematically approaching reaching a goal compared to just people just doing stuff is that you can learn. You can learn how to better solve problems in the future, but you can also learn details about this specific problem. And you can get an idea of what's working and what's not working. And it's difficult to do that without some sort of scorecard. It's just hard. So the challenge is that some people use the analogy, it's kind of like building an airplane while you're in the sky, trying to fly it. It is definitely harder to start from a place where you don't have already established disciplined way of solving problems. You don't have processes that are reasonably in control with some degree of standardized work. When you're just building that while you're trying to address a crisis, it's really hard. So it certainly takes probably more effort in a sense than for Toyota to set up a new factory where they already have very skilled, knowledgeable people that they send in, and they've done it many times before. And they have an established system that they're putting in place. So starting from scratch is difficult. And that's one of the advantages of this kata model is we would go in and say, don't try to solve world hunger this month. think of one thing you do where you have a problem where it's difficult and you'd like to do more of it. It's a core thing, like simply delivering the food to the food bank or delivering the food in the food bank to the people who need the food. So pick one process and then work on that using the somewhat structured method. And once you have experienced it, then you can start to think how it applies to a second process and then a third process. And normally we suggest that the processes start from what's relatively easy, like you're not going to start learning violin by playing a Bach concerto. So start with Mary Had a Little Lamb, so what's simple? And it's simply, say, the process of delivering the food and in this one location. And then as you learn more, take on harder and harder problems until eventually you could deal with the Fukushima disaster. Now that may take years. So that's where the long-term perspective comes in. But if you just start throwing tools at the problem, you're not going to really improve anything in a sustainable way. You're not going to develop the skills and the mindset and the people. So we suggest starting small and starting with something that's relatively routine. And with this kata model, you're always going to be asking, what am I trying to achieve? And you're going to ask, how would I know if I'm successful? And if you're coaching, you're going to err on the side of simple measures. We make check marks on a piece of paper. And at the end of the day, we put them onto a bar chart. And here's the bar chart. Just take these numbers and put them here.
Yeah.
And now we can visualize how we're doing. And so if you could come up with, you mentioned Six Sigma, which is advanced statistics. That's not what you want to be teaching when they're getting started.
I'm doing just lean.
Check marks on, we call lean is kind of the basics.
Yeah.
So making check marks and then adding up the numbers and putting them on, transferring it to this form, that's the level you want to be at. So once people start to experience it and they do it and they get better at it and they feel more confident, because at first it's overwhelming, then they can take on bigger and bigger challenges.
May I interject something?
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm remembering you're talking about the red, yellow, green in a Toyota factory and just running a factory with simple Kanban cards. Having been involved in a lot of chaotic situations in software development over the years, sometimes you get to the end of a day and a software team feels like they've been in a running firefight. And one of the most effective measures I've ever come up with in a situation like that is at the end of the day, and the end of the day team huddle or stand up, just ask them to give us a 1, 2, 3 finger, everybody in the room. How are we doing today? 1, 2, 3 fingers. Add it up, put that number on a wall. And day by day, you watch this number go up and down. And that's the team's sentiment of how do we do today versus how do we do yesterday. And darned if it's not a good measure ultimately that the team is making progress against something important. And how that translates into people in the field, Andrew, I guess it's you do what you can with what you've got, wherever you can put something on the wall.
You're absolutely right. So the on a given day, I could critique that measure and say, why 3? And it's just like off the top of their head, why aren't they analyzing how they're feeling? And why aren't you asking them more detailed questions that are specific aspects of behavior during the day? So that measure, what I'm saying is that measure is crude. But that crude measure, when you look over time, is giving you a picture of a trend. And all you're really interested in is the big trends. You're not interested in all the details of exactly how I'm feeling that day. Just want to know, today was a good day. Next Monday was a bad day. And I see some sort of trend where it's actually getting worse. So now we would ask the question, why? Why is that happening? What's the cause? And then we would ask the question, what might we do about it? And what I'm saying with the experimenting is when we ask, what might we do about it? You don't have to come up with the perfect solution. If there's 5 different ideas, pick one and try it.
Yep.
And see what happens. Learn by doing. And be comfortable with failure. And we're pretty sure this would work, but it didn't. So let's go back and try again. And the more quickly you can do those PDCA loops, and if you can do the PDCA loops quickly, so for this kata thing, Mike recommends spending 20 minutes a day. But if you spend 20 minutes every day, you're going to see a trend of improvement, and you're going to see a trend of learning. And it will stick with people more than if they're deluged with information for a 3-day workshop or a 3-day course, and they take home notebooks filled with information and PowerPoint. So a little bit every day really makes a difference.